Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the 10th series of Temple of Surf, the podcast. Today with us from Hawaii, another amazing surf legend, Mr. Randy Rarick. We discuss with him about surfboards, surfers, and much more. Aloha, Mr. Rarick. Welcome to the show. Where are you today?
Well, I happen to be sitting at Sunset Beach on the north shore of Oʻahu, Hawaii. And the surf's about 6 to 8 foot right now. Unfortunately, we have a little bit of an onshore wind, so it's not the best conditions. But being on the north shore and being in Hawaii, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing is the best thing ever, every surfer, wants to be there in a way or another. I had only one experience coming to Hawaii. I was ready to surf and everything. And as soon I hit the land in Hawaii, I was sick for a week and I had to fly back. So I need, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, you didn't experience it. Like I always tell people, they have to come to Hawaii because Hawaii is like Mecca of the world of surf. And, no true surfer, at least you make a pilgrimage to Hawaii. And regardless if you surf Waikiki at 1 foot or you surf the North Shore at 15 foot, as long as you see it, you can say, I've been to Hawaii. So at least you can say you've been to Hawaii.
Yes, yeah. As a tourist, now next time I want to be coming and surf, And obviously, Hawaii represents, of course, many stories, many great legend, and even today, it's because I always refer to the past, right? But it is so powerful today. Many champions are from Hawaii, women and men, Clarissa Moore, John Florence. It's like it's incredible how the island is so rich of talent and never stops, right? So
yeah. Well, for me, I'm really lucky because I'm what they call a local haole. In other words, I'm a white, not Hawaiian, but I grew up in Hawaii, and so for me, I've experienced Hawaii from a very young age. I started surfing when I was 10 years old, and I got involved in the surfing industry at really young. At 14, I started working in one of the local surf shops, and I had no idea that my life would be like it is. But I'm really proud of the fact that I'm a surfer, and I've done all that I can, and try to contribute as much as possible to the world of surfing. And being from Hawaii, you're really proud when you're from Hawaii. And like I said, even though I'm not of Hawaiian blood, I'm a haole Hawaiian, but they say I got Hawaiian in my blood, but even though that's not my blood. So I'm proud to be from Hawaii, and it's a great place. Like you said, there's been amazing surfers come out of Hawaii for hundreds of years now.
I have a very silly question in the way I will express it, but
Sure.
The question will mean more than what I will say with words. What does it mean to be a surfer today?
It's a lot different today than it was, say, when I was a young surfer. I think in the last 30, 40 years now, surfing has changed. And the reason it's changed is because of professional surfing. And when I was a young boy up through my teens, you surfed for the pure pleasure and you surfed because it was a lifestyle. Now with professional surfing has become a sport, and being a sport, it's been exposed to the masses. I mean, it's in the Olympics, as you know, and professional surfing has got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of US dollars spread around the world, whether it be, Australia, South Africa, US mainland, here in Hawaii, the main areas. But, now they're surfing everywhere. They're building a wave pool there in Dubai. They're surfing in places like Norway where it's freezing cold. They're surfing in obscure places that no one even thought of surfing before. So being a surfer now is a much bigger responsibility because you're part of a bigger community. Before, it used to be like what we called a tribe. It was a small group of people from certain parts of the coastal areas, and now it's expanded. So I think, I'm really proud personally to be a surfer, and I think once people experience surfing, it's something like no other lifestyle that they've ever tried. And most people surf as a lifestyle surfer and certainly not as a competitive surfer. So if you look at it like that, it's different than those that consider it like a sport. So it's actually really hard to describe what it is to be a surfer. it's something more of an experience and a feeling than it is anything else. So I would say there's a tagline from one of the old surf companies that said, only a surfer knows the feeling. And that is actually really true. You got to try it to know what surfing's all about.
Exactly. And since we were talking about Hawaii and we talk about surfing with aloha, do you think that this aloha today still lives in the professional surfing, at least the surf that is portrayed to us in the television, in the media, or that aloha is getting weaker and weaker? What is your
No, I think aloha's still there. I think just like everything else, things change. And the concept of, like, for instance, the first surfers that really came over to Hawaii were the West Coast surfers back in the 40s and the 50s. They came during World War II, and then just after the war, when the surfboards started getting fairly a little more developed. And the Hawaiians accepted them. Hawaiians shared their food, their surf spots. They showed incredible amounts of aloha. You see pictures of the old Beach Boys and Waikiki teaching the tourists how to do the hula and taking them out surfing and tandem riding and canoe riding. I think there was a lot more innocence to the word aloha back in those days. But I think if you go most places, the concept of aloha is something that has come out of surfing and come out of Hawaii, that when you go in the water, everybody's the same, regardless of what religion you practice, regardless of what color skin you have. Everybody's a surfer in the water, and they're all the same. Nobody's better, nobody's worse, and it doesn't matter what language you speak or whatever. I've traveled around the world. I've surfed in about 70 different countries, and the sense of aloha is you give respect and you show respect and you will get respect back. And I think that's what aloha is all about. And you can expand upon that and say aloha means I love you, and aloha means, sharing and a lot more details. But really it comes down to, I think people, when they came to Hawaii, they respected the Hawaiians, and the Hawaiians exported the world, the sport of surfing. And surfing is now, like I said, a sport around the world. And if you can share that aloha with other people, then you're sharing a good world. Like, we're unfortunately they're having in Israel and Gaza and that, they're having the wars that are going on there. I went surfing there, and I surfed in both Gaza and I surfed in Israel. And in both places, the fact that I was from Hawaii and I was a surfer, I got shown their form of aloha to me, and I gave it back to them, and sharing the waves in places. So it doesn't matter what kind of people they are or where they are. If you show aloha, you'll get aloha.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with you. And in your opinion, I ask this question everyone on the show: what is the most important thing in surfing?
Most important thing in surfing, I think, is just to have fun. I mean, that's what surfing is all about. You don't. It's funny you say that, because there's what I call fashion surfers now. There's people that have taken up, since COVID, they've started surfing because when COVID came, they banned, tennis and golf and all these other sports. But surfing is the one endeavor that people were allowed to still do. And so around the world, literally tens of thousands of people took up surfing, and they became fashion surfers. They didn't take up surfing because they had the feeling or they really wanted to experience that stoke. They did it because that's all they could do. And it's interesting because a lot of those people aren't trying to become better surfers. They're just doing it because it's fashionable to do it. So I think the people that are hardcore surfers, people who really embrace the surfing lifestyle and what it's all about, and try to improve their surfing, try to improve the environment through surfing, those are the true surfers. Because there's a lot of, I'm not going to say fake surfers, but there's a lot of phony surfers out there for sure nowadays.
Well, yes, it's normal, because yes, also COVID played an important role into expanding the number of surfers. Let's say, not that most people are happy about it, because the waves were already crowded.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting in that light. Here in Hawaii, for the first 6 months of COVID on the North Shore, it was like wonderful, because nobody was coming to Hawaii because all the travel was banned. You weren't allowed to go to the beaches, but you could still go surfing. You could park your car, you could walk across the beach, and you could go out surfing. And for those of us living on the North Shore in particular, it was like going back to the 60s. I mean, I live at Sunset Beach, and I can drive down to Haleiwa, which is the main town, in about 15 minutes. And back then, I actually made it from my house to Haleiwa in 11 minutes because there was no one on the road. And it was like a fantastic time. It was like a time machine taking us back to when there was no surfers. So I hear what you're lamenting, that nowadays there's way too many people. It's much more crowded. But believe me, it's going to get a lot more crowded than it is. I mean, when they start building wave pools in Dubai, people are taking surfing seriously.
Yeah, but in fact, I don't know. There are a couple of things that I want to say. The first thing that the listening to the stories of the early days in Hawaii, 60s, and not so. For instance, when I interviewed Joey Cabell, he told me, Alessandro, it was so difficult to get a buddy to come to surf with for safety reason and also for validate the stories as well. No, I saw that huge wave. It was not just like a bar story, and like looking for a buddy to come and surf. Today we arrived to there is so many that we want them to stay home, right? So it's crazy because it's that happening in 50 years, or something. And it's fantastic to think about those empty ways, and
but like I can say, you can't be selfish. You can't try to hoard the waves to yourself. So you just have to accept that more and more people are going to be taking up surfing. During the from the 70s through till about 6-8 years ago, I was involved in running the professional contest here in Hawaii, and for probably 20 years we were trying to get more people to come to the North Shore. We were using the contest to help promote Hawaii. I thought it was a really good deal that these contests created awareness, and people traveled from around the world to watch the tournaments, and the surfers that were lucky enough to compete in them, begin to win good prize money. And I was really proud of promoting Hawaii and promoting the North Shore. And then this is about, probably 10 years ago now, we were running the Pipeline Masters, and I was the director of the event. And I walked from the beach up to Ehukai Beach Park, which is the beach park. And you've been on the North Shore. It's a small rural area on the North Shore. It's very, what we call country. It's not like a big city area. Anyway, there was about 50 women in line to go to the women's bathroom. And I went, oh my gosh, this is crazy. We've done too good of a job of getting people to come to the contest. And there was about 10,000 people on the beach at Pipeline. And like I said, for those that have been to the North Shore, it's a 2-lane road. There's not the infrastructure for that kind of. And I realized then and there that, we need to change our kind of model of how we're doing this. And so we went to really promoting the events online, and we changed from, people coming to the beach and seeing it live to online. And now 10 years later, you look at the WSL and the coverage that they give the events, and it's incredible. You're actually better off staying home and watching it on your TV or your computer than being there live. You miss the experience, but you don't have to fight the traffic.
No, definitely the traffic is always like an issue, parking the car more than anything else, maybe. But there is nothing will replace the experience of being there. And this, I think, is applicable to every sport, from Formula One to snowboard, to surf, to football, like with the technology allow us to see many more things and to follow and also to have people that comment and describe what's going on. But being there on the beach.
Yeah, no, I think everyone should try to experience a professional surfing event. And obviously here in Hawaii, and particularly at Pipeline or Sunset, or if it's a big wave event like the Eddie Aikau at Waimea Bay, you get to see the most fantastic experience. And at Pipeline, that's why Pipeline, so his pipeline only breaks about 75 meters off the beach, and you hear it when it explodes, you feel it when it shakes, when a wave breaks, you smell it from the sea smell, and then visually you get to watch it up close. So that, as you said, it's an experience that's unlike, you can have great coverage and you can see a lot of replays and commentating and all kinds of stuff like that. But when you're there live and you see it in action, it's an experience to be had for sure.
Exactly. It's also sharing time with friends or making new friends or just like hanging out on the beach and whatnot. So it's cool. And regarding the surf pools, you know, I think it will give the opportunity for so many people that are living in remote areas or let's say Central America or Central Europe. There is a wave pool in Switzerland now to get closer to a sport and to find the stoke. No,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, the wave pools are kind of like a driving range at a golf course. You go and you rent a bucket full of balls and you get to, practice your swing and hit one ball after another, after another, after another, and it improves your golf game. It's a similar deal to go to a wave pool where you can catch, depending on the type of wave it is. Of course, there's the ones that, spit out a wave, one right after another, and they may not be the best waves, but at least you're experiencing that. Like you said, if you live in a place like Switzerland, it's a lot, more fun to go down the street than go halfway across the continent to find the ocean. And then the other problem is, not the surf isn't always good. I mean, Mother Nature sometimes doesn't deliver. And there's a lot of times, like you said, you were here for a week and you were sick, and unfortunately, you didn't get a chance to surf much, So the real thing will never be replaced. I mean, wave pools are really good for the expanding public, and they obviously show that there is a lot of interest in surfing, or they wouldn't be commercially viable. So I think that's what you asked earlier about now compared to earlier. When I was younger, it was just like I said, a tribe. Now it's a huge city, and pretty soon it's going to be a huge country of surfers worldwide. So, and each generation is enjoying what they have at the moment, and everybody laments like, oh, the old days were much better, and oh, it wasn't as crowded as it is now. Well, it's going to be 10 years from now, it'll be just that much more crowded and that much more people surfing. So I tell like people, go out there and do it, have a good time, as you said, get stoked on what surfing has to offer you and take it for what it is, when it is and where it is, because that's the way it's going to be.
no, definitely, definitely is right approach. The thing that went too fast, so fast, you know, because like in 1964, I think, first World Championship, and
Right.
there is not too much space. You know, it's like relatively quick, and so for that reason, people maybe they look at the old days like, but because they were just there. And anyway, yes, you said about being commercially viable. When you started creating events, surf events, or still even with the triple cano surfing, there was not so much money in that.
No, back, I was a competitor back in the 60s, late 60s. I won the Hawaii State Surfing Championship. And back then, you would get a trophy and maybe a free bar of wax. There was no money involved. It was all about the honor, the glory, and the bragging rights of being a good competitive surfer. And as you said, the first World Championship was started in 1964 in Australia. Then 65, they went to Peru. In 66, they went to California. Then they started skipping it every other year. In 68, it was in Puerto Rico. In 1970, it was back in Australia. And then 1972 was the last of that, quote, amateur surfing championships. And about that time, I was traveling around the world. I'd surfed in Australia, and I surfed in South Africa, and I'd surfed in a lot of places. And I could see that pro surfing was coming. There was a few small events in the late 60s, early 70s, but they'd have maybe $5,000 total prize money. I think 10,000 was a big deal back in those days. But I saw that pro surfing was coming and was going to become a definite entity. So I teamed up with Fred Hemmings, who was the 68 world champion in Puerto Rico, and he had retired from competition and began to produce events. And so we formed what was called International Professional Surfing, IPS, was the first world tour in 76, because I could see the writing was on the wall that pro surfing was going to drive the sport. And as I said earlier, when we were talking, up to then, it was a lifestyle. Up to then, it was amateur. There was no money, but money was entering it, and money was going to change it from this lifestyle to this sport. And all of a sudden, surfing was becoming legitimized and commercialized. And the difference between surfing and all the other bat, ball, and stick sports is we don't have a stadium. Mother Nature provides our playing field, or provides our pitch, or provides our stadium, if you want to call it that. So you have to go where there is going to be good waves, and almost everywhere in the world, bar a few places, it's open to the public and you can't charge an admission. So this is what makes surfing different from other sports. Is everywhere else you have what they call a gate. In other words, you pay to get in, like a Formula One race. You buy a ticket, you sit in the stands, and you get to watch the race. Well, with surfing, you just come down to the beach or sit on the side of the hill or whatever it may be, depending on the location, and you get to watch the competition basically for free. So that's why there was a huge growth in what we called the surf industry, because the surf industry all started with surfers trying to figure out a way to make money so they could go surfing, which is kind of funny in some ways. And so they started making wetsuits because they wanted to have a better wetsuit to surf in colder water. They started making surfboards to be able to surf better. They started making surf clothing so they could have clothing that looked good. And all these companies, and the early ones were like Billabong and Quicksilver and Rip Curl and Ocean Pacific and Hang Ten. All these companies were started by surfers so they could make some money so they could go surfing initially. And then the surf industry grew, especially during the 80s. And with it, they put a lot of money into promoting professional surfing. And so the events all grew. And like I said, the first few events had $5,000, $10,000, and then pretty soon there was 30,000, and then there was 50,000. And I remember when we went to $100,000, it was like, wow, this is big time. And now, you have world tour events that give away nearly $500,000 and equal prize money for men and women. So the growth of pro surfing kind of mirrored the growth of the surf industry. And I saw that coming, like I said, 30, 40 years ago, way back in the 70s. And so for the first 6 years, I ran the world tour. I went around the world and went to all the tournaments. And then the IPS was superseded by what was known as the ASP, which was Association of Surfing Professional. And that further expanded the tour. And then that was bought out, which is known as the World Surf League, the WSL. So that was just kind of the natural growth of as professional surfing grew and the industry grew, so did the organization. So I stayed involved up through the I retired back in 2015. So it's been 8 years now since I've stopped running the tournaments. But for 38 years, that's what I did. I ran professional events here in Hawaii, the Triple Crown. We built into a powerhouse series of 3 events. And then I helped in events all around the world. And, I ran the first event, for instance, in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and look what happened to the Brazilian storm, I helped run the first events in Japan. And now, we had, surfing in the Japanese and the Olympics last time around. So, my contribution was more to see the growth of surfing. And ideally, I try to really help promote Hawaii for sure, but I looked at it more of an international point of view. As surfing grows worldwide, everybody will benefit from it, and they have. And now the surf industry is, $1 billion, like $6 billion industry, and people buy Vans or Quicksilvers or whatever they want, what brand they like, to represent a little bit of piece of surfing in their lifestyle. Yeah, and the companies are making money, and they in turn have invested back, and you got guys building wave pools in Dubai now. So, like I said, it's going to become worldwide.
Even if there is a certain change of wind, if you want to say, for surfers, buying big brands, or like if it was before, like we have seen all the major surf brands have suffered quite a lot because maybe there is they went too far out from the core of what a surfer is and what surfer represents, and they became kind of those fashion surfer that you were saying before, right? And so,
well, I think that's just the natural. That's going to happen. I mean, the more you try to make, the more you're going to go beyond the hardcore surf crowd, and there are still guys that still make handmade surfboards, for instance. Or you can go to Costco and you can buy a board for $110, made in China or Thailand or wherever it is, and it does the job. But are you really a hardcore surfer if you're riding a soft top surfboard? That's questionable. And you could be a surf enthusiast and then move on to get a custom board from somebody. But there's always going to be the hardcore people that design surfboards, the surfers that design what's going to become considered contemporary surfing. That's always going to be there. Yeah, I think you're right. The surf industry is kind of shrunken because they got too big for themselves. They outgrew where their fan base was. And, they had to basically sell out, as we say, to keep making money, you got your shareholders, that want you to, continue to make more and more money. And then there's, small companies that are content with just having a little niche part of the market, and they're really cool and they're very hip. And that's how surfing started back in the 70s and 80s. And it's perhaps looking for a little bit of a retrench now. And we'll see where it goes. For instance, it's ironic that I helped build the whole pro tour. And yet personally, I'm not a super fan of surfing being in the Olympics. It's a dream that Duke Kahanamoku had, that surfing would be recognized and represented. But in doing so, it has kind of changed the soul of surfing to the commercialization of surfing. So, it's a double-edged sword. You get something you pay for something.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are a lot of different currents of thoughts. I don't know if is the right thing to say, but there are the kind of ideas of surfing in the Olympics. Of course, there was a Duke, is part of the Duke legacy for sure. When I spoke with Fernando Aguirre in occasion of the Tokyo Olympics, we were talking about the fact that he wanted to create this Olympic village, with all the heritage of surf, the first boards up to all the history, the shortboard revolution, and so. And then for Tokyo at the end, because of COVID, it was not possible because nobody could see. Now for France, this July and August, it will be in Tahiti, so far away from people, so impossible to see. And of course, there will be 2028 Huntington Beach, on which is going to be a fantastic place to show, to portray and showcase the history of surf. But of course, the media itself, they will not give so much depth on the history of surfing, and that they will portray like any other sport. Who's going to win the gold medal? And yes, in certain way, it will make the sport more like a show than a reality. But this is what's happening also with the WSL today,
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, Duke Kahanamoku was the father of surfing. He was the ambassador of surfing, and he won, 3 different medals in the 3 different Olympics. And he spread the stoke around the world. He took surfing, really kicked it off in Australia and New Zealand and the East Coast of the United States. And, so that message of showing people how surfing is and how cool it is and what a neat thing it is to be a surfer, all that's really good. And the Olympics themselves, I think, are fantastic. And like I said, you mentioned Chris Amore. I mean, she's from Hawaii, and, to become the first gold medal Olympian as a surfer, that's amazing. In that sense, I think it's terrific. Fernando Aguirre, when Fernando first started, I knew Fernando almost 30 years ago, and he had this dream. He said, I want surfing to be in the Olympics. And I said, well, it's going to be a hard slug, but good luck with it. And then he pulled it off. You got to hand it to Fernando. He made it happen, and he got surfing in the Olympics. And for him, my hat's off to him for persevering through all that. And but surfing, once again, it's so unique compared to the bat, ball, and stick type sports. And then I just read in the paper the other day where they're going to start giving money to the track and field Olympians. They're actually going to start paying the people in the Olympics. And I was like, wow, that's the beginning. That's the crack that's opening up. So all the other sports are going to say, well, we want to get paid too. And it's, the track and field sports have been around forever, and they were the basis of the original Olympics, obviously. So that's a good place to start. But money is going to come into the Olympics, and it's going to change everything. If you look at all the other sports now that have gone professional, and, money drives the sporting world, and that's just a reality of what it is. So, you could say, well, it takes away from the soul of the sport, but I think the good thing is when the competition's done and they pack up the judges tower and everybody goes away, you can still paddle out and catch a wave.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And but in effect, what I know from maybe from the Italian Olympic Federation, but maybe I'm doing a mistake, so I apologize if I say something that is not correct. If you as an athlete win a gold or silver or bronze medal, you get a prize from your Olympic country Olympic group, you know.
Right.
So athletes still are receiving money if they win because
Yeah. Well, I realize that, they have to support them. I mean, the ones that probably are making the best out of it are probably going to be the Chinese team. They're going to have more money than anybody when it comes to it. So we'll see. But it's just, the fact that they're going to make it public now that they're going to be paying these guys $50,000 if they win the gold medal or something. Like I said, it opens up the floodgates. But that's a whole nother story. We can talk about that later.
We don't want to get in trouble. But to complete what we were saying about Olympics, what I hope it will really happen is that, as they're saying for the USA Olympics in 2028, there will be longboarding, there will be para surfing Olympics, and I think and maybe other discipline. And these I think will complete, the way of portraying a sport that today is just kind of the visibility is left to the shortboarding. I mean, to the what is.
Yeah, no, there's the different disciplines in surfing, and once again, it legitimizes. It's much the same way that happened back in 1976 when he went for an amateur. Because if you remember way back in the 60s during the Olympics, you had to be an amateur. You couldn't get paid back in those days. You had to be an amateur, and a lot of guys missed out on an opportunity of making a lot of money, but they dedicated themselves to the sports. And so I think, it will legitimize surfing by the time it gets to, California. And, to me, Huntington Beach is not the best place in the world. It has good waves occasionally, but when you got to run through all the different disciplines with longboards and para and women and men, and it's definitely going to be some representation and some junk surf is unfortunately going to happen. And who knows? Mother Nature may come through and it may be fantastic. And then that's why a lot of people say they do like the wave pools, because the wave pool you can control the wave. It's going to be what it's going to be like. It's going to be the same wave. Some people say that becomes boring because you don't see the nuances of Mother Nature delivering, good waves or bad waves. So, the thing I tell people about surfing, it is a subjective sport. If you get into the whole concept and conversation about judging, there's no difference now than it was 50 years ago. Being a subjective sport, there's always going to be a matter of opinion. So one guy's going to like one surfer, somebody's going to like somebody else. And that's just the reality of it. And I think it's going to be interesting as the Olympics go on, how they explain to the general public, how they decide who's a better surfer and what have you. And then what that does, competitive surfing then dictates what is contemporary surfing. So the guys that are the Olympians the type of surfing they're doing for the next couple of years, that will dictate the style that surfing is going to take. And this has happened, for the last 100 years. Somebody comes along with a new style, a new type of riding, wins a competition or something, and that then dictates the into the future what the type of surfing we're going to see. So you could have, longboarders get the best surf in the world, and everybody go, oh, let's get rid of shortboard surfing. Longboard surfing is happening now, or something like that, and it could dictate, the direction of surfing in the future. Who knows?
How important is style for you in surfing?
To me, I was talking a little earlier there about subjectiveness. It's kind of like when you watch figure skating, they have a discipline, and they go out on the ice and they go out and they twirl around and they jump and they land. And, one judge gives them an 8 and the other judge gives them a 10. And you go, what's the difference between the 8 and 10? And to me, it's all about style. I think style is what dictates good surfing. I've seen some fantastic surfers who could do amazing trips or aerials or what have you, but they just had a horrible style. I mean, they were ugly to watch, basically, but you had to give them points because they did what was required as far as the discipline of what the judges were looking for. So In my opinion, style is everything. If you look through, since say the longboard era in the 60s, the stylistic surfers were always the most pleasant to watch. And then like in the 70s when shortboards came along, Jerry Lopez was considered Mr. Pipeline because he was the most stylistic surfer at Pipeline. And as through the years, the surfer that had the best style, usually if he was a good competitor as well, would end up being a really champion surfer. So I think style is pleasing to watch. That's why in today's world, I'm really glad to see women surfers finally developing their own style, which is a little different from the men surfers, because I personally think the women surfers are much more stylish than the men. I watched at Kelly Slater's wave pool when they had the competitions there, 8-time champion Stephanie Gilmore. She was the best surfer of all the surfers there. She was better than all the guys because why? She had the best style. And to me, style dictates what a good surfer is.
Yeah. And I think, like there should be kind of a push from all the industry, from all the people about underlining how the importance of style in surf today, because I think that can make a big change between transforming surf into X Games. Just
Yeah, well, and that's a really good example. I mean, if you look at the current WSL, there's been the controversy of Ethan Ewing, who's a very super smooth, stylistic surfer from Australia, versus, say, Felipe Toledo, who's a fantastic aerialist and trickster surfer, but completely different style. And a lot of people think Ethan Ewing's a better surfer because he's got a better style. And then you got the controversy, you can't tell that to any of the Brazilians, they're not going to go for that. But the point being is that style dictates what's considered good surfing by most people, for sure.
We need to educate in a certain way. So the concept of subjectivity is there on the judges and on the people, of course, on each one of us. That's part of our normal life, right? But we need to educate the audience, the people that are watching on the TV, to recognize what is style and what is just like athleticism or maneuver, and
sure. Well, I think that was a few years ago, the controversy in longboarding erupted when there's kind of the longboard surfers had gone more and more to shortboard type of maneuvering, to the point where classic longboarding, smooth, stylistic longboarding was left on the wayside for what they called progressive surfing. And you had guys that were pulling aerials and tricks and what have you on longboards, but they looked terrible on them. And then Joel Tudor came along. The pendulum sort of swung back the whole other way to the duct tape type of tournaments that he presented that were just super stylistic, but not very progressive. So somewhere in between, there's a happy medium of having progressive surfing, but doing it with style. And that's, as you just said, a matter of educating the public to consider what looks good, but also is doing good.
Yeah, exactly. And so the news is yesterday news of the retirement of Kelly Slater. And Kelly Slater, of course, had a huge impact on everything, but also on the Triple Crown of surfing, right? So what was your favorite moment linked to Kelly Slater and a competition that you ran for so many years?
Well, I think Kelly was the best thing that surfing's had for the last 30 years. He's been a tremendous ambassador. I put Kelly up there with Duka Hanamoku. I think he's done more for surfing in the modern age than any other person on the world. He's carried the sport literally for the last 30 years, since he turned 20, I think 1920 when he won his first championship, and he went on to win 11, titles. He's won 6 Triple Crown or Pipe Masters. He's won 3 Triple Crowns. He's been the best representative of professional surfing, and the WSL is going to have a big problem on how to replace him, because there's other really good surfers, like, say, John Florence. He's been a multiple champion, but John is not very charismatic. He doesn't, stand there and carry the weight of the world of surfing on his shoulders like Kelly did. And Kelly did a fantastic job of what I call being an ambassador to the sport. So I known Kelly since he was a little kid. He came to Hawaii, I think when he was 12 or 13 years old, the first time I met him. And I watched, over the last 40 years, his career develop. And just then I handed him thousands and thousands of dollars of checks here in Hawaii as he won virtually every contest over here. And I think there's not going to be another 11-time world champion in our lifetime, that's for sure. And there's going to be a big void to fill here, and it's going to be really interesting to see what role Kelly takes moving forward. He's not in the Olympics, unfortunately. That was his goal, to kind of go out as an Olympian. I think what they should do is make him the honorary ambassador to the surfing, and let him either surf or showcase himself in Chopu, and that should be his swan song. He can say, this is what good surfing is all about. And what a great, here a guy at 52 years old is still, competitive as he has been. And it's going to be a hard act for him to follow. And it's going to be interesting for him to see where he wants to go in the world of surfing, because the doors are wide open for whatever he wants to do. People will follow him. It'll be interesting to see. But I think, congratulations. He's had a great career, and the fact that he's done. Some people say he should have retired 2 years ago when he won the last pipeline event that he surfed in. And but when you're that good, it's hard to say no. So, and I think we'll still see Kelly in a couple pipeline events, maybe Chopu events. He'll get a few more wild cards over the next couple of years. So it's kind of like watching, Michael Jordan go back out on the court, and then it's kind of like watching Tiger Woods go back out on the course, and, still, they may not be what they were in their prime, but they still are who they are. And that's what's important.
The legends of a surf. And by the way, as far as I know, the WSL CO position is still open, right? So
could be, you never know.
So maybe they have a way to keep him inside the.
One last little flaming star,
Exactly. Okay, and then I don't want to steal a lot of your time, but I'm passionate of surfboards, and I know sometimes saying I collect surfboards is. Some people will refer me as a cook. Well, you should not collect, you should surf all of them. But what to do? Maybe it will be because of the divorce with my wife one day, because of too many surfboards. I don't know. But so today you are, but you, I saw your story, I heard your story. So you started in a very early age to shape or fix surfboards. But today still, surfboard shaping is a very important part of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved, like I said, for 65 years in the manufacture and what we call the surf industry. I started really young. I learned to surf at 10. I made my very first surfboard when I was 12 years old. I started working in a surf shop at 14 years old. I worked my way through high school, literally repairing boards. I was what they had a nickname called Super Patch, because I was the guy that patched the boards and repaired the boards. And well, a lot of guys, wanted to become a shaper early on. I saw the value of repairing the old boards and keeping them in the water. And that sort of translated into a passion for me. And even during the professional years when I was running the contest, I was still shaping boards. During the 70s, we didn't have much money, on the pro ranks yet. And so I would go to a stop and I would shape 2 dozen surfboards while I was there and get paid enough to make enough money to go to the next stop. But during that whole time period, I was always watching what was happening with the surfboards and what was happening with designs. And I tell people now that, and I admire you that you collect boards, because that's great, because surfboards represent the art of our design and our history of surfing. If you go back, when the pre-contact here in Hawaii, and the Hawaiians cut down a tree and made their first surfboards out of a solid wood tree. And then during the turn of the century, they started making plank boards out of milled redwood. And then balsa came along. The boards got lighter in the 50s. And then in the 60s, they developed foam, and we had long boards. And then in the 70s, we went to the short boards. And then for the last 40 years, we've been basically refining, boards and the technology of all the composites, the epoxies, and modern materials have just improved and made the surfboards even better. So I think it's really important that we collect the boards and show the history of our sport through the designs that the boards have. Because as I was talking earlier, surfing continues to evolve, and it evolves through the surfboards that the designers make for the top surfers to ride. So if you show those boards and you keep those boards in good condition, or you bring them back and find them and recondition them or restore them, it's no different than looking at a car collection. You look at a car collection from, back when they first made cars that were like, horse and buggies, as they called them, and then they gradually evolved into better. And then after World War I, they got really good into the 40s, and then the 50s, the boom of the big fins and flashy chrome and everything, and then came the muscle cars, and then came the Volkswagen van, and then came the exotic cars like Porsche and Maseratis and Ferraris, the supercars as they came along. And then same thing with surfboards. They've evolved each generation, something new comes along. And so to save and restore and keep those boards, to me, is really important. So now that I'm retired from running the surf competitions, I still shape boards, and I focus my energy on restoration of old boards. And I would say that, there's probably 6 guys in the whole world that are really good. And I'm one of those 6 guys that, can bring a board back to life from the dead. And I specialize in what we call glass off restorations. It's kind of like a car, where you take a car off the frame, the body off the frame of a car, and rebuild the motor, put a new upholstery in, repaint the car the same color it was. And it's still the same car, and it's been brought back to life. No different than a surfboard. I'll take a surfboard and pull the fiberglass off, clean up all the dings, fix the holes, get rid of the brown foam, and then remake the board the way that it was made in the day. And I specialize mostly in 60s and early 70s, because that's the era that I think is really important, where we went from longboards to shortboards. And nowadays, unfortunately, most of the boards are made on a computer. And so they're basically just, you can knock a board out, and there's not the designers that there was pre-computer. Back in the 60s and 70s, you had guys hand shaping all these boards, and each one was different. And for the pro surfers, it was really important to get a board that worked really good. And you're constantly trying to improve and figure out ways to make the board be faster, more maneuverable, whatever it may be that you're looking for. So I've spent the last 6-8 years since I retired from competition to focus on really doing what I can to make the best possible restoration and exhibit boards that are really, really good. And so, I was involved with all the different surf auctions over the last 20 years that offered boards that come up for. I spend hours and weeks and days looking for old boards and crawling under people's houses and going up in attics and trying to find these boards that are stashed away or hidden in a pile in back of somebody's yard. And I bring them out and I bring them back to life. And I have a website, just randyrarick.com, where you can actually go and see. During the early 2000s, for 10 years, I put on auctions here in Hawaii, and we would invite the top legends of the air who designed or shaped or manufactured the boards. And there's all kinds of photos there. There's all the results from the auctions. And we started in 2001, and by 2011, our last auction, we did $750,000. That's $750,000 in sales of, vintage boards. So not only are they valuable, but it's history in the making, for sure.
That one was the one with Greg Knoll. Was when you were able to reach 750? Was the one that you did the special Greg Knoll, or?
Well, we had Greg used to attend all the auctions, and he passed away, 3-4 years ago now. And he was always good. But whatever boards we had in the auction, we would have. Could be Bob McTavish from Australia. It could be, Jerry Lopez with a pipeline board. It could be Rich Harbor or Rennie Yater or Bing Copeland from California with one of, the California boards. We always tried to have whoever was the manufacturer, the shaper, or the, pro surfer. We had Mark Richards. We had Sean Thompson back in the day with boards that they had ridden in the competitions. So that's what's really important. You get a board, because there's hundreds of thousands of surfboards have been made, but only certain ones are going to be valuable. And those ones that are valuable are ones that are unique in, as I said, depending on the manufacturer and the shaper and who the rider was. So you have to know which ones are valuable, and it really makes a big difference. And so luckily, being in the surf industry for 65 years, I know everybody and anybody that's in the industry. And I've actually had Duke Kahanamoku surfboard that I've sold, and I've sold Kelly Slater surfboard. So, and, everything in between. So it's interesting. And to me, it's a real passion and a real love to see these boards. So believe me, if you've got a collection, my hat's off to you, to, the fact that you're still enjoying your collection. And I think it's great. And don't let your wife tell you otherwise.
No, I know, but how happy wife, happy life, right?
Exactly.
So, what was the most challenging restoration that you had to do so far?
The harder ones are the wood boards pre-fiberglass, because those were the early ones were solid redwood or solid type koa or different types of wood. And then they had to seal them. And in the early days, the Hawaiians, they would rub on them like the soot from a fire. They would take the charcoal and rub it into the grain of the wood to try to preserve the wood. And then they put oil on that to seal it so the salt water wouldn't come in. Then they went to the plank boards, where they in the 1930s, they developed what they called waterproof glue, where they could glue different planks of wood together. Before that, they had to put a rod through them and screw them in. And so the early boards are hard to work on because they were all wood. And then when fiberglass came along, was basically an invention from World War II. The aerospace industry, developed resin and fiberglass during the war and during World War II, and that transferred over. And they figured out how they could begin to coat the boards with fiberglass and resin and make them waterproof, basically. And then that's when balsa came along. So the wood boards are hard to work on because they're organic. The early ones were hard to work on because they were up to thing. When it came to foam, and they developed foam in the late 50s, early 60s, that exploded the world of surfing, because all of a sudden now you didn't have to cut down a tree basically to help a surfboard. You could use foam, and it really changed. And the golden age of surfing was in the 60s. That was when the Beach Boys were around, when the movie Gidget came out in Southern California in the late 50s, early 60s, and everybody wanted to be a surfer. And that's when the car culture of Southern California took off, and surfing went mainstream at that stage. You had all the surf movies and the surf music, and surfing became the thing to do back in the 60s. And the boards that went along with it, certain boards became very valuable. Other ones were what we call pop-outs. They're ones that are like the Costco boards of today, a soft top board of today. There was versions of similar. So really, it's interesting. There's different generations. So to say what was the hardest board, is hard to pick one specific board. There's been a lot of them. But I worked on, like I said, boards that belong from Duke Kahanamoku to Kelly Slater and everybody in between, and literally every major manufacturer, brand, or pro surfer or famous surfer. I've probably had a hand in dealing with one of their boards at one time or another, or at least I've seen, felt them, and touched them. So I've actually had probably 100,000 surfboards pass through my hands in the last 60 years. So, and it's funny, on my computer, I take pictures of all these boards I work on and see, and I have over 40,000 pictures of surfboards on my computer. And I just got back from Australia, and I did a tour of all the legends from back in the day. And in 1 week, I saw surf filmmakers Jack McCoy and Dick Hoole. I saw Wayne Lynch, who was instrumental in ushering in a new shortboard era. Saw Nat Young, a world champion. I saw Bob McTavish, who was the guy who started the shortboard revolution. I spent a couple of days with George Greeno, who was a kneeboarder who introduced the shortboard to the Australians. I saw with Rusty Miller. So I spent a week and a half in Australia and saw all the legends of the sport in literally day after day. So it's nice to know all those guys, and nice to help. I sat and talked surfboard design with Bob McTavish for 6 hours, and we reminisced about when he came to Hawaii, and George Greeno, same thing. George, we talked earlier about Big Wednesday and the Bear brand. You know, George was a cinematographer that shot a lot of the footage for the movie Big Wednesday, and he helped introduce the shortboard to the Australians. So it's history in the making when you have all these surfboards.
Let's make a deal. Next time you go to Australia, I pay for all your fees of the travel, but you bring me with you.
Yeah, you can be my board carrier. That'd be great.
Yeah, I do whatever, no problem. Wow, what a memorable trip! Fantastic. Okay. Listen, I will finish our interview with the short Q&A session. So please answer the first thing that comes up to your mind. As you have listened to the podcast, you're familiar with it. It's everyone answered the same question. So the best surfboard that you ever rode.
Man, that's a tough one because I've ridden a lot of surfboards. I would say I had an 8-foot Sunset board that I rode for about 8 years at Sunset Beach, and it was considered obsolete by the time I stopped riding it, but it was the best board that caught me the best waves in what I consider the best surf spot. So Sunset Beach, my Sunset gun, 8-foot Sunset gun.
Okay, not bad. Favorite shaper of all time?
That's tough. You almost have to divide it into eras, but if I was to pick one guy who influenced me and who I think influenced Hawaiian surfing, I would have to say George Downing.
Okay. A personal question, your favorite song or kind of music?
I'm a rock and roll kind of guy. So when I'm shaping, I put on classic rock. I'd say that represents my youth, and it keeps me pumping still to this day.
Nice. I like that. Favorite surf spot, if it's not a secret?
No secret at all. I live at the favorite surf spot. I live at Sunset Beach on the north shore of Hawaii, Oʻahu, and you can ride Sunset at 1 foot. You can ride it at 15, 18 foot, and everything in between. And I think it's the best wave, the best competitive wave on the North Shore. And a little sidebar, we were talking about Kelly a little earlier. It's the one spot that Kelly never won a surf contest at. He never won a contest at Sunset Beach. And I would tell Kelly, you're never going to be a complete surfer until you win at Sunset Beach. And now that he's retired, I don't think Kelly's ever going to have that last box checked off.
Okay. Maybe you're challenging him now also again. We'll listen to this and we'll come back.
That's what I keep telling you. You still got a chance.
Exactly. Favorite surfer of all time?
Once again, you'd have to almost divide it into different eras, but my personal favorite surfer was Jeff Hackman. Jeff is kind of my contemporary, he's the same age as me. He won the first Duke Invitational when he was 16 on the North Shore at Sunset Beach. And then he went on to be the best surfer at Sunset during the 70s. They wrote a book called Mr. Sunset because he was so good out here. And if you watch footage of Jeff, I'm a real, I have a real penchant for Sunset because I live right here. I surf here all the time. And to me, Sunset's much more challenging than, say, Pipeline. So I'd have to say my favorite surfer to watch was Jeff Hackman.
Of course. And his style is incredible, It's fantastic. Last question is a little bit unusual. I'd like to know your best relationship advice, whether it's a relationship with a romantic relationship or friends or relationship with the ocean. It's up to you how you want to answer to this.
When I was 16, I met Duka Hanamoku, and we talked about this as earlier in the show here. Really, it's more about giving back. And I think if you have a relationship in surfing and you can stoke people out and you can make people feel good about themselves as a surfer, then you'll feel good about yourself for being able to do that. So I think it's kind of, if you give and you will get, and as Duke told me 10 times over, you'll get rewarded for what you put out in surfing. And that's been my philosophy my entire life, where I've tried to make people feel good about it, take surfing for what it is and enjoy the sport. And if you get a smile out of them, then you've accomplished your task.
I could not agree with you and the Duke. So these are legendary words for me too. Mr. Rarick, I thank you so much for being with me, and I look forward to talk to you very soon. And if you're flying in to the Abu Dhabi Surf Fringe, let me know. We will.
Yeah, I definitely, I'm hoping to surf that before my career is over with. But same thing, we hope to get you back here on the North Shore of Oʻahu, Hawaii. And if you get here, I'll paddle you out on a little day at Sunset Point and definitely get you a wave or two at Sunset Beach.
That will be amazing. Thank you so much, and talk to you.
Right. My pleasure. As we say, aloha.
Aloha. Thank you. Goodbye. Hi, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed our today's episode. If you want to know more about us, please follow www.thetempleofsurf.com and all our social media. Mahalo!